I'm Stephen Hall, author of Maxwell's Demon, and you're listening to Booked.
Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. This is a book that the two of us have been excited about for the entire time since we read Raw Shark Text back in the day, I'm assuming. Today is the day where we get to have a conversation about Maxwell's Demon by Stephen Hall. Before we get into our regular banter about how great this is, I'll get the bio out of the way really quick. His first novel, The Raw Shark Text, won the Borders Original Voice Award, Somerset Maugham Award, and was shortlisted for the Arthur C. Clarke Award. The book has been translated into 30 languages. His second novel, Maxwell's Demon, which we're talking about right now, was published in the UK in February 2021. The book's been called a dazzlingly smart postmodern treat by The Observer and superb by The Telegraph. In 2013, Stephen was named as one of Granta magazine's best young British novelists.
Got to give him some credit for recognizing talent, I guess, right? Granta magazine.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I'm kind of pissed at The Observer because I thought we could just say, hey, this is a dazzlingly smart postmodern treat, and then be like, this is the shortest episode ever.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, they beat us to it, so we'll have to elaborate a little bit. Here is the book synopsis for Maxwell's Demon. Thomas Quinn is having a hard time. A failed novelist, he's stuck writing short stories and audio scripts for other people's characters. His wife, Imogen, is working on a remote island halfway around the world, and talking to her over the webcam isn't the same. The bills are piling up, the dirty dishes are stacking in the sink, and the whole world seems to be hurtling towards entropic collapse. Then he gets a voicemail from his father, who has been dead for 7 years. Thomas's relationship with Stanley Quinn, a world-famous writer and erstwhile absent father, was always shaky, not least because Stanley always seemed to prefer his enigmatic assistant and protege Andrew Black to his own son. Yet after Black published his first book, Cupid's Engine, which went on to sell over 1 million copies, he disappeared completely. Now strange things are happening to Thomas, and he can't help but wonder if Black is tugging at the seams of his world behind the scenes. Absurdly brilliant, wildly entertaining, and utterly mind-bending, Maxwell's Demon triumphantly excavates the ways we construct meaning in a world where chaotic collapse looms closer every day. Do you think 1 million books is a lot of books? And when I say that, we'll get into the story, right? But like Andrew Black was like everybody knew his name. Like that's the impression I got. Like one of the biggest authors ever. I don't know if 1 million books really is indicative of that.
Oh, maybe we'll have to look up quantities of best-selling books. Here's what I'll say though. That's 999,990 more copies than I have of the Raw Shark Texts.
This is very true.
But yeah, I think if you want to go all-time bestsellers, I'm sure that Da Vinci Code is over 40 million.
Now, to be fair, I pulled this up and I realized that there are probably people that want to hear about this book, but here are books with more than 100 million copies. Do you want to take a guess? This first one, I know you've read, so I don't know if you want to take
one of the Harry Potter books.
Yeah, and the Philosopher's Stone. Is that the first one?
That's the first one, yeah.
So the first one, 120 million. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which is French. There's a Chinese book, Dream of the Red Chamber. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name. And then J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So we got to give it up for J.K. Rowling, who was able to do bigger numbers in much shorter periods of time, right? So that The Little Prince is published in 1943, The Hobbit in 1937, etc. So yeah, 1 million copies, really.
Well, all right. It sounds like small potatoes from that perspective, but then I guess how many books have broken 1 million? You know what I'm saying? Or what percentage of books breaks 1 million copies sold? It can't be that high.
Oh, the percentage? Yeah, the percentage I'm sure is less than 1%.
Right.
Maybe
so it's still remarkable.
I put it to you this way: Bridget Jones. Do you remember that terrible movie,
Yeah.
Bridget Jones? So the book that was based on, 15 million copies.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that like I'm million is still it's nothing to, you know.
Yep, no, I know. I was simply it caught me off guard when I read that. I was like that doesn't seem like, you know,
Well, and all right,
the gravitas of that book.
since we're nitpicking the synopsis, Livius mentioned something before we started recording, but then I noticed something else too. So this is the thing that happens when there's a book that has the potential to be like something where you have to pay attention and like kind of put the pieces together, like a puzzle type book as opposed to the paint by numbers type book. You start digging into the details of stuff. And so in the first paragraph of the synopsis, when it says talking to her over the webcam isn't the same, they talk on a phone, but he's looking at a webcam.
And again, I'm not going to fault Stephen for any of this.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that when Stephen Hall publishes a book after 13 years, that a lot of dirty little hands get involved in the process. So that being said, we're going to go on and actually talk about the book Maxwell's Demon.
I'm
Thomas
very
Quinn
excited
is
about this.
as am I. Thomas Quinn is our protagonist, as you may have caught from the book synopsis, and we start off in his very, very young years to get a picture of what his life looks like. It's mentioned in the synopsis that his father is absent because he is a journalist and a writer who travels a lot. So we really get a look mostly at Thomas and his mother, Alexandra Quinn. And, she's, not doing so well. She's got some health issues, but she loves the hell out of this kid, spends a lot of time with him. And he gets his love of literature from the time he spends with his mother.
And immediately, not only do we get to see like the backstory of this character, but you can see how he ties thoughts or ideas to things a lot, and that's just, it seems to be kind of typical of Stephen Hall style. But when he talks about his father going away and coming back, it's like he has, like when he comes home, it's like he's reassembling from these little pieces that he gets, like hearing his voice over the radio or seeing an article in a magazine, all assembled into being a person. Or how his mother, with her illness, seems like she was just always in a state of transitioning to being something else, which would be when she passes away while he's, still kind of young. So right in that first chapter, Stephen Hall does not pull punches with like rich imagery and just making you think about things in a very specific way. He has a great way of putting higher, bigger thoughts into like easy to digest words, and I think it's a nice way to just push you right into the deep end of concepts paralleling storytelling, because there's no lack of that in this book.
Yeah, I think you put that much better than I would have. And we'll get to that. But one chapter on Thomas's childhood, we fast forward 30 years to today, where he is, again, as the synopsis mentioned, kind of a failed novelist. He wrote one book. It didn't do very well. He tried a couple other books. They were not purchased based on the lackluster sales history of his first novel. And now he's still writing, but he's writing in some worlds that he doesn't feel real passionate about. So he's doing tie-in novels and short stories and stuff like that. And we catch him at an odd time. His wife Imogen, who is a scientist, has gone on a scientific journey, as the synopsis, halfway around the world. So we catch him a few months into him kind of being on his own. Bills are piling up. He's not really selling anything. He's not even super motivated to do the work to sell anything. So I'll use the word that will likely come up a few more times. Entropy, right? Like he's not putting in the energy. So life is deteriorating around him. And then something kind of interesting happens.
So in his kind of clunking about his apartment, he's just kind of doing his thing and at one point is on the toilet when the phone rings, and because he's on the toilet, he doesn't answer it, but from the other room, because it's an actual landline with like an answering machine, not his cell phone. He hears, eventually the answering machine picks up, and he hears his father's voice, asking if he's there, and he says his name, Tom, and it's like his dad died 7 years ago, like it says in the synopsis. So it's like he freaks out and he tries to like run to the phone, like his pants are on his ankles, and there's nothing on the machine. He calls the operator. The operator's like, yeah, the last call to this, to this house was, yesterday in the afternoon or something like that. So there's like right away there's this freaky, unexplainable thing that happened, which is that his dad called and was talking on the machine, but the phone call never happened.
Yeah, and although we don't want to get too much in the story, because some of this you have to discover for yourself, it's not just that his dad called. His dad asks him a question. And the question leads us into a variety of things. So there's that, and that goes. The reason I wanted to mention that specifically is because once we get done talking about the story, there's gonna be some other things we want to talk about, and that really kicks off that part of the book. At least I felt like that's what kicked off that part of the book. Rob may disagree. But subsequently, shortly after that, he receives a little bit of a late letter from Andrew Black. An upstairs neighbor is getting, the wrong mail in their mailbox. Finally, they bring down this mail. It's for Thomas, and amongst all of the past due notices and that type of thing is a letter from Andrew Black, who he does know and has spent time with, but has not done so in a number of years. And inside is a short note asking, hey, what do you think this is? And a photo, a Polaroid perhaps, of an almost impossibly black sphere on a table. And when I read that part, did you look at any of this stuff? There was a organization a number of years ago that developed a color of black.
Oh, Vanta Black.
That's the one. Yeah. Did we talk about this on the podcast before? Okay, yeah. So that's what I pictured when I read that it was that black, right? As he talks about it,
right.
It's almost like a hole in something and not like a something itself.
Yeah, like it was the only thing that made it seem three-dimensional was like the way shadows happened in the photo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So that really moves our protagonist on to a journey. So to explain a little bit of backstory, Andrew Black, after his first novel, had a falling out with the publisher and essentially disappeared from the face of the earth. Just not available. Nobody knows. And we should mention that it's a pseudonym. So it's not the person who wrote this book's name is not Andrew Black. It was written under a pen name and essentially disappeared from the face of the earth for all intents and purposes. So when Thomas receives this letter and this note, he goes to his agent, who is also Andrew Black's agent, saying, I'm worried about him. This is kind of weird. I think it's a cry for help. And then we're introduced to one of the other, key characters in this book, Sophie Almonds.
Yeah. And it's weird because when I was setting up some notes about this, I was thinking, yeah, there's not a lot of characters in this book, but then a lot of characters in this book, but not like a crazy amount, but like, there's people who have impact. Sophie Almonds is the literary agent for Andrew Black and Thomas Quinn. And this is where we discover that the runaway success author, Andrew Black, is a little more problematic than has been depicted from, Thomas Quinn's point of view, who's basically like, well, my dad loved this guy more than me, and this guy's super successful, and my book didn't do well. Talking to Sophie, she's been really burned by this dude because he had a falling out with the publisher, and one of the most potentially successful authors, of the time, basically just dipped out from publishing altogether. And so she's got a really negative opinion of Andrew Black and sees him differently. So when Thomas Quinn is like, hey, I think something weird's going on, I want to go see Andrew and see what's going on, she warns him against it. And that's kind of where, so this has all been built up, and this is where, like Livia said, like adventure is about to start. Andrew Black resurfaces, contacts Thomas in a really kind of confusing way that causes concern, and now he wants to go see what's going on. His agent's like, that's a bad idea. There's nothing good that's going to come out of this because this guy is just, he's bad news. And now I think we're going to kind of dance a little bit around what we can talk about as far as plot goes, but I've got some ideas about other elements of the book as well.
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to head into those. So both Rob and I have read this book twice now. Once when we first had access to it, Rob, through a friend of the podcast, received a ARC copy. I received a digital ARC copy, which was a mess, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then again, leading up to this review. And really, on my second go through of the book, I looked at it a little differently than I did the first time. So the first time I didn't know what I was getting, right? So here's how I see it. There's a core story, and that is Thomas Quinn's story. And then there is a lot of what in my head I've been thinking of as like supporting material for the story. And although it ties into the story, it's very different and almost academic, if not actually, I'm not even going to say almost, it's academic in scope. And that's what I said before. The phone call from his father prompts Thomas to look into some things. And those things have to do with language and the creation of language. And this expands through the course of the story. So that's one of the supporting things that happen in Maxwell's Demon. The other one is the kind of look at storytelling and the mechanics of storytelling, which happens a variety of ways. One of the ways is through the book Cupid's Engine. Now, the book Cupid's Engine is the book that Andrew Black wrote and sold 1 million copies of. And then otherwise, there's even other actual, like real life books that are quoted, which we'll talk about, I think, too, a little bit. So you have kind of like three things going on. There's, for me, and then I'm going to ask your take on it, right? You have a core story that's about a person and what he's going through at this point in his life. You have the supplemental material about language and words and the creation of language. And then you have storytelling mechanics as like a third kind of side story to all of this. Did you feel that it read that way?
Yeah. And so to support that thought, one of the things that Hall was known for with the Rorschach text, which reemerges in this book, is the idea of kind of an unconventional like layout. So some of the supplemental information that Livius is talking about is revealed, not all of it, but some of it is revealed through a series of creative footnotes, which manifest mostly as leaves. So at some point on a page, you'll get to a word in the normal text, and next to it will be a little like an icon of a leaf, of a type of leaf, like a maple leaf or whatever, an oak leaf or whatever it happens to be. And that is, in place of the kind of superscript number that a footnote would usually have. And then on the page, you'll see a corresponding, image next to a text, like a bubble of text in the shape of that leaf. Those different leaves, present like supplemental information, like Livius was saying. So a lot of stuff about, like the types of characters and parts of stories would be some of it. Other stuff is talking about instances of things throughout history. Like there's an entire leaf that just talks about the importance of names and how knowing a name gives you power over stuff in certain religions or folklore or whatever it happens to be. So a lot of the supplemental stuff you get is through this kind of creative leaf pattern footnote structure. And what it does is it just kind of gives context to what's happening in the book. And I don't think it's necessarily clues like, hey, if you read this stuff, you'll know what I'm trying to do. I don't think it's necessarily that, but I think it enriches, like the knowledge you get from those little footnotes enriches what's happening in the story. The story itself carries on its own. Like, you don't need the footnotes to appreciate the story, but it enriches your understanding of what's going on.
I guess I will talk about my first read through now, because I have what could be a fairly unique perspective. The advanced reader copy digital version that I received, approved through the publisher, was a hot mess. Rob can attest to this because he was the beneficiary of receiving a couple of photographs of my Kindle.
Yeah, good Lord.
Where the leaves did not play out into actual sentences, but like 2-letter words, 1-letter words, nonsense and gibberish. So here's what I will say. The core story, I really, really liked. Could you read the core story without supplemental information? Yes. And had I have read it that way, I probably would have given this pretty high marks and maybe have cast the story aside, like read it, reviewed it, moved on with my life. The supplemental stuff in there, I think really puts this good story way over the top. And I say that because I don't want anyone to think like, oh, this guy just told us this is a treatise on language, and it's boring or whatever. No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I'm looking forward to talking to Stephen Hall because some of the concepts he puts forth there are really, if you think about it, kind of life-changing. I mean, there's some stuff there that some theories and premises, which again, I'm not going to go into here. I want people to read this, experience it for themselves. But, like there's some things in there that can make you look at things a lot differently, I think.
I agree. And I guess I'll ask you the question, because you had the original reading experience where you couldn't rely on the leaf notes. Was your understanding of the story toward the end clearer this time around than it was the first time?
That's really hard to answer, and here's why. Because I had the ending of the story in my head. Well, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, yes, absolutely. But I don't know if that was the leaf.
The block.
Footnotes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, much like reading the Raw Shark text for a third or fourth time, you start looking for the things along the way because you know the end. And that's kind of how it was here. But I don't know, I mean, I'm trying to think. If a Stephen Hall book came out and it didn't have weird shit on the page, would we be disappointed? And my answer resoundingly is a little bit. Like when you do something like the Raw Shark text, and for anybody who hasn't read the Raw Shark text, for fuck's sake, go out and buy a copy and read it. Ask Rob to loan you one of his 12 copies. It's an additional dimension. The word art, which I don't even know if that's the right word for it, but the word art in the book brings an additional dimension to the story. So when you get another Stephen Hall book, you crack it open, and the first thing you do is you thumb through it. Now, we had a preview a year ago of one of the leaves in the book, and I thought, well, of course, this is almost what it has to be. I'm not saying that Stephen can't write a great, brilliant, because he's a storyteller first and foremost, outside of this other stuff. But it's like a signature almost. Like you kind of expect it.
Right. Like, so, and it's actually funny that you say that because when someone's talking about the unconventional formatting of a Stephen Hall book, the first author everybody thinks of otherwise, for the most part, is Mark Z. Danielewski with House of Leaves. I'd imagine that almost anybody you talk to who's not like a serious academic or like focused on that specific topic would probably put those two as like their top kind of two thoughts. We recently read The Little Blue Kite by Danielewski, which wasn't, as weirdly formatted, but because it was just text, but it had text with different colors, and depending on what colors you read as you read through, you could get a different like size story. And So I know this is a total aside, but I'm agreeing with your point. Back in 2013, Hall published what's considered a short story, but it was kind of an excerpt from what this book originally was called The End of Endings. And even though it's just straight text all the way through, there's kind of two parts to it from different, time periods. The first part reads through on one side of the page, and then you flip the book over, and then in a negative where it's black paper and white letters, you read the other part. So even though it's just text, he couldn't just have you read it straight through. He had you read one half on white pages with black text, and then flip the book over and read the other part, black pages, white text.
I can't believe that I don't have a copy of this.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm definitely going to bring it up when we talk to Steven. But anyway, that was a real tangent.
Yes, it was. Sorry, and I'm looking on how to acquire a copy, so I could probably put that off until the end of this review. Yeah, so there's that, and then like I said, there is a lot of stuff about the creation of language, and I don't want to say too much about it, but I'm fixated, and definitely want to ask Steven, and we'll leave it up to him how much of the book he wants to give away, right? Because it's his book. But like I said, it took a really good story to, in my opinion, a great novel, and I'm certain that those things did nothing but add to. So footnotes don't always do that for me when I read them in a book. Sometimes they're good. Okay, so we just did the Paradox Twins, right? And the footnotes were funny and poignant, and they made sense because it was the person who compiled and selected these excerpts from 3 different books and who knows how many screenplays, like their commentary on it, which typically proved to be entertaining more than informative, I think, in that book, and they were fine. But footnotes usually just take you out of the story, and in this case, I think it did nothing but enrich.
Yep. Yeah, and there's the weird thing is there's so much to talk about in this book. Like, I don't know how far I'm going to go, so I'm going to dip a toe and see where this leads. But one of the other elements that is pervasive throughout the book is the book Cupid's Engine, that was written by Andrew Black, and it's not just a book that's looming over the head of Thomas Quinn as being like, the book that was superior to his, or Sophie Almond's as being the book that like she thought was going to be a career maker that ended up, causing her lots of trouble. It shows up in different and interesting ways. And this is where I don't know how much we can say, but like, the characters in the book actually have an impact on what's going on in the story. So like this book leaks into the real world in ways as well.
Yeah, I think that's about all we want to say on that. You're right. So Rob and I had a little bit of a conversation before we started the podcast, and he talked about pace and how the book ends not too quickly. The book's too short overall, right? Like that's one of the things that I've said many times on this podcast, right? For as quick of a read as this is, an awful lot of shit is packed into it, So it's I don't know how to say it. The book is bigger than the number of pages they contain, which quite honestly, the Raw Shark text was too, as I think back to our review and my previous readings of that, right? Like there's more story in both of these books than fits in the number of pages. And there's not a lot of writers that can say that. I'll be honest, there are books I absolutely love that there's like this dull part, usually about 2/3 of the way in or so, where I go, okay, I just got to get through this because I know this is going to pick up, and it does, and it's still a book that I love, but there's a lull, and there's no lull in this book. So it's got a ton of stuff packed into it, all of it interesting, all of it keeps you turning the page. I know it sounds like a wrap up, and we're probably heading in that direction. But despite the fact that it is, let me open up my copy. I read a paper copy of this one, guys, and I recommend you do the same. About 338 pages of story, maybe 337, with some word art in it. Doesn't, there's a lot in there. There's more than 330 pages worth of story, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I'm interested in hearing your perspective on this, because we've talked about books in the past where you can approach it at the level you want to. We know that I'm a just idiot about how obsessed I am with understanding the story in Rorschach texts. And I feel like this book has the potential to like let people go down rabbit holes as well. Because of like what Livius was saying before about like words, the power of words, the creation of things, a lot of scientific concepts and stuff as well. Like the title Maxwell's Demon is a physics, kind of conundrum from, like 120 years ago or whatever, that has to do with entropy. So there's that. And when I was preparing to talk about the book, I was like, man, I need to read this like 2 or 3 more times before I can really like say what I think is going on, which is ridiculous. But I feel like much like the Rorschach text, this is the type of book where someone could just obsess about understanding the mechanics of it, the rules of it, and like what the meaning of the outcome is. But on that first read, when I still was like not really sure what was, the overall structure and skeleton of it, like the story for me was just so like satisfying that had it like disappeared from the world, I wouldn't be upset, because the story itself was good on its own without having like challenging you to figure out everything that was going on.
Yeah, I agree. As a standalone story, if you took the core story, which is Thomas getting from point A to the end of the book, it's great. And I think it can be enjoyed that way. Now, there's not an easy way to enjoy it that way, because you could skip over all the leaves, I guess, but there's still other stuff that's in the text. So Rob mentioned the actual title, Maxwell's Demon, which has to do with the second law of thermodynamics. And it sounds sciencey, and for a guy who's not super into science, like there's very little science. Like there's an explanation of what entropy is and how Maxwell's demon was used, which is a theory used to prove that wrong for a long, long time. I believe it was about 100 years. So, I mean, in answer to your question, here's what I will say. So I've read it twice. There's a very good chance I will read this book again. And I want to answer a question that I think probably Stephen Hall fans are asking is this one going to leave me scratching my head at the end? And yeah, I think so. And I guess I'll throw it back to you. Is this a head scratcher along the lines of the Rorschach texts?
Yeah. Short answer, yes. But I'd say that I think, and this is Olivia's thing, I think Stephen Hall's got an idea of how it all fits together, as opposed to leaving it intentionally vague. I will say that. I'd say that there's probably going to be someone who breaks it down and has notes and stuff, or like flow charts, and figures out, well, this says this, so that means this and this. You could do that and come up with a an admirable theory about what it all means. But yeah, like part of the fun is like just enjoying, like being along for the ride. So yeah, I'm happy thinking I have a pretty good idea, even and not necessarily feeling like I need the definitive explanation.
Yeah, I feel less so than I was gonna say did with Rorschach text, but I just finished it again this morning, and I still, it's gonna be hard. So we're interviewing Stephen Hall. When you hear these episodes, will be much farther apart than when we're recording them. And it's gonna take Rob a lot of time and like muting me to keep me from like just berating Stephen Hall on whatever, the ending of this book and the ending of the Rorschach texts. Like I'm gonna have to exercise a lot of self-control, and then there's probably gonna be a lot of stuff edited out. The final the final cut from Rob going, Jesus Christ, man, stop yelling at this guy about the ending of the Raw Shark text. So
I'm just looking forward to the fact that there's going to be stuff that doesn't make it in the episode that we get to hear. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And,
there'll be an unepisode.
An unepisode, exactly.
Perfect.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
All right, let's go into wrap-ups, shall we?
Yeah.
There was very little chance that I wasn't going to love a new Stephen Hall book. But there's that part of me too that says, you know what, you can't. The more excited, the more you anticipate something, the better chance there is that is going to be a letdown. I also I thought a lot about Lamb when I was reading this book, oddly enough, the first time around at least. And I thought about Christopher Moore saying, people keep walking up to me even to this day and they go, oh, I really love this book, but it's no Lamb. And I was worried about that for Stephen Hall. Maybe even a little bit after I finished Maxwell's Demon. But on my second reading of Maxwell's Demon, I no longer felt that way. I think that Hall delivered a very compelling narrative core story and surrounded it with brilliant information. The stuff on entropy, which we touched on a little bit. There's biblical stuff that's touched on. There is language and the power of language and words. And then there's story mechanics all built into this book. And when I add those all together, I find this as rewarding as reading the Raw Shark text. Different, maybe less cerebral in that way that I'm not trying to pick it apart to find a specific answer or to look for clues nearly as much, but just a very, very well-rounded novel. I absolutely love this one. It got almost all 10s, which has not happened. The conclusion got a 9. I'm not going to talk about why on here. And the pace got a 9. And only the only issue I had with pace was I had to use a fucking magnifying glass to read some of these leaves. And you're trucking along and you're reading your page every minute and a half, whatever pace you read at, right? And then you get to a page and you're like, now I've got to get a magnifying glass and spend 9 minutes trying to fucking read these little leaves, right? So that's where I dinged it. Just one point on pace. And that comes out to a 9.75. I believe that's my highest score in the year and a half that we've been using this system.
I'd say there's a good chance you're right about that. That's high praise, literally high praise. So the simple thought is thinking to myself, I've waited 13 or 14 years to read this book, and that Granta End of Endings was a little bit of a teaser in the mid 2010s, because some of that stuff that was in that story made it into this book. So it's obvious parts of that story informed early parts of what became Maxwell's Demon. It'll be interesting to see if there's some sort of it'll be interesting to see the genesis of this book when we get a chance to talk to Stephen very soon. But all of that is to say, it's something that's been on my mind for a while. Jesse Lawrence sent me an arc before I knew that was even a possibility, which was like the nicest thing in the world. I was so excited. And it was just great to read. But like Livia said, I was thinking about this earlier today. There's this like impossible conundrum of, if you really loved something from someone, there's no way that thing that you anticipate coming next isn't going to be impacted by your feelings about the other thing. And so obviously when I come into a situation like that, one thing I do is I really lower my expectations and I just kind of try to take it as much for what it is. There's no worries. This is a great fucking book. The story, I mean, what Livia said was actually really well stated, and I can't say it better. So I will agree with everything Livia said about the story and how the other elements kind of elevated the book experience overall. For me, it's astonishing what Stephen Hall does, and in as much as he tells like a really compelling story about people, but then he challenges you to think about all of these other things and how they affect life, or presents concepts that make you think differently about things. And so it's like you get a great story with all these bonuses of like he adds context to the world almost. And so it's a great book. I loved practically everything about it. I did give a lower score for pace, and I made a note that said, honestly, went a little faster than I'd hope. And all that means is if there was 1,200 pages, I'd still be like, man, I wish there was more, because it was just a very satisfying book. One of the things that's really clear now that this is his second book is that he has this kind of reverence or love for words, or the impact of words, or just like books in general. And that comes out very clear in this, with just the power of what writing can do, or the power of individual letters, and how that has subtly manifested in history. There's a lot going on, and I will read this multiple more times, and I might end up being that dude who makes flowcharts and stuff like that. But for now, even on the first read, it was a very satisfying read. I was very happy with it, and I was just I was glad that I got a chance to read it. So overall, I gave it 9.5 out of 10. So 0.25 points lower than Livius, with an average score of 9.625. And if that's not the highest average that we've had, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, sorry, other books. This is the best book we've read in a really long time.
It's just freaking great.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are going to hear us talk with Stephen about the book, but don't just order it. Just pre-order it. It comes out on April 6th. If you order it from Amazon, they'll usually drop it on your door on release day. Don't wait. Get this one for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's just very good. And Raw Shark Text stands up, I would say. We read it, I think, in 2019 or 18 for the podcast. And that's one of those books where if you haven't read it before, it's so good. It's just a great book. You can't go wrong with Stephen Hall. Buy them both. Read them both. And then this is the type of stuff where it's like, if you have an idea about something, share it with us, because there's a lot of thinking you can do about it, about the meaning of things. And absolutely one of those books where off podcast, all of our conversation was about stuff we didn't talk about in this review. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on in the spoiler area, that we chatted heavily about, as well. So, far deeper than what we were able to talk about without spoiling things.
Yeah, except for Sean Ferguson, who didn't like the Raw Shark Texts. He should not order a copy of this book. He should probably not read books anymore.
Yeah, he should just, he's doing all right. He's out there. He's got a family. He's a dad.
Yeah. No, I wish him nothing but the best. But there will always be some division in our friendship because of Raw Shark Text thing.
Wish him better taste in reading materials.
Yeah, exactly. I am super excited. We're going to be talking to Stephen Hall. For us in like 14 hours. For you guys, it's probably going to be more like a week. So I'm ridiculously excited. Two things I want to add. A year ago, we reached out to Stephen. There was like a lot of weird publication date rumors and stuff about this book. So we wanted to get to him early, see if he could help us get copies, and obviously to kind of like hook him into talking to us on the podcast. And he was very kind. He went back and listened to our review of the Raw Shark Texts, but he sent us a preview, which was one of the leaves that we talked about. I believe it was just a screenshot probably of it, whatever PDF or whatever he had on his desktop. I don't know if you know this, but for a year that has been in my line of sight whenever I'm in my office at work. It is sat next to my monitor, and I've changed offices over the course of that year. And quite honestly, I think that's the only thing that moved offices with me that I didn't like pack up in a box and throw in the basement. So you want to talk about anticipation? I've been looking at that leaf for over a year now.
That's cool. Yeah, we're not shy about talking about my fanboyism with Raw Shark texts, but I restrain myself sometimes. There's for Raw Shark text there are the unchapters, and you can find some of them, circulating on the internet. One of them is the aquarium fragment, which has a little word image of a baby shark, not like the song, but
Thanks, because everyone's listening right now.
It's in your head.
Yeah.
And it says, it says some stuff on there, and I put it on like a 8-inch by 8-inch little canvas. First of all, that tells you something about how nutty I am. But then I was like, all right, where am I putting this up? Where am I putting this up in my apartment? And there's a whole like reflection theme in the Raw Shark text, like the reflection becomes the view or whatever. The reflection becomes the image, whatever the thing is. It's important.
No, it's the view.
The view. All right, thank you. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna put it on the wall in my bathroom next to the mirror. So when I'm like standing there washing my hands or brushing my teeth or whatever, I can see this little shark thing, but then I can also see its reflection, and then there's like meaning that like references the book in this like kind of physical location of this thing. So yeah, like just have me committed now, because that's how much I think about this stuff.
I committed what I consider a sin today, and I listened to a Stephen Hall interview. Rob will tell you, I avoid doing this if we're going to have somebody on the podcast. This is the first time in 10 years, basically when you're hearing this, that I've done this. And I just wanted to share with you on the pod. I could have told you about this off the podcast, but he did mention two particular unchapters, and where they are never going to be seen, essentially. So, and I don't know if you know this, one of them was rolled up, put into a bottle, and thrown into the sea. He didn't specify which sea, just the sea. One of them was taped under a park bench that you could find if you paid really close attention to the Raw Shark texts. That is gone. It is missing. And we're going to assume that it was found by somebody who had no idea what it was, or I'm thinking it would have made it into the now defunct Stephen Hall forums from, the rawsharktext.com, or something, right? So there are at least two that will never ever, or are very unlikely to see the light of day, which means that book's never really done, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of does. And part of me just wants the full picture. Part of me wants all the unchapters, and I've done like the lazy man's. I've done like the Wikipedia research level version of finding unchapters, which is just like going to the forums and going where other people said they found stuff. Yeah. Buying editions that have different stuff. Like the Canadian version has the glossary in the back, so I have that. And at the front of the Canadian edition, there's something as well. But maybe I've seen three or four of the 36 unchapters. So I just have to decide it's not a sad thing that I haven't seen the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I have questions about it. So I just added a question to tomorrow's interview. I just want to know if he has all the unchapters, which I'm pretty sure he does. And I don't think he's ever going to share them. But, it's probably not that hard to find out where he lives, right? I mean,
yeah,
just saying. But so, So for sure, pick up the Raw Shark text, pick up Maxwell's Demon. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about before we sign off for the evening?
Well, it's kind of like it's like an untopic in a way, just a theme, just a theme against what we've been talking about with Raw Shark text. I have successfully continued to not watch the movie Cherry, so there's that.
Congratulations, some entropy at work right there. I think.
I was really channeling Thomas Quinn in my levels of activity.
It's like character actors, right? Like you're reading a book, so you try as much as you can to be like the character. Yeah. Well, there's always this week, so maybe we'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath on if you see Cherry by next week, but yeah, I don't really have much of anything. I read 3 books in the last, I don't know, 10 days or whatever it's been. So really my extra time has been spent and not, not easy books, right? There's Maxwell's Demon and Raw Shark Text. So these aren't ones where, I was half paying attention to pay, I was really, really paying attention.
Like focused, yeah.
Yeah, and if you tune in next week, I will, because that's the other question people might have, right, is does this at all tie into the Raw Shark texts? And I don't know, maybe Stephen Hall will figure that out, or maybe we'll get that in, we'll pull that information out of him with some clever questions, with some things we noticed on our next episode.
Yeah. Well, and here's the nice thing: like me and Livius had a lot of had a lot on our plates the last couple of weeks with reading and stuff. The next time you hear an episode after the Raw Shark Text and the Stephen Hall interview, we will have probably had a really light load. Says I feel like there's some casual time coming up. That doesn't mean, because this is like our 11th book review in a row, I think. Like the last 10 or 11 episodes have all been book reviews, so we're gonna coast for a pinch of time.
Yeah. Here's what I will say. I do want to get this out there, because the next time people hear from us, we will roughly be at our 10-year anniversary. So happy 10-year anniversary.
That's happy 10-year, yeah. I don't know if you were waiting for a response.
No, yeah. It's okay. Either way, that's fine. I'm sure you'll send a card or something. But no, you know what happens at 10 years, right? You get an extra week off. Isn't that how it works at jobs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. So we get an extra week of vacation.
Love it. I love it.
After 10 years. So, yeah. So there might be a little bit of a gap where we're not exactly sure. We're working on something, I guess, is what we're trying to say. But we're going to be very vague about it.
Yeah, we earned it. 10 years. All right. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope we did the book justice. Even if you think that we didn't sound like we knew the hell we were talking about, 100%, this is a book that you need to read. So please go check it out.
You read a Stephen Hall book and try to explain it to someone.
Yeah, exactly. Next thing you'll hear is Stephen himself explaining everything to us. Until then, I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Nedden. Keep reading.